मकरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति सपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासवी गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। अनार्पित चरम चिरात करण्यावतीर्ण कलो समर्पयितम उन्नतोज्ज्वल रसां भक्ति श्रेय हरि पुरट सुंदर तिथि कदम्ब संदीपितः सदा हृदय कंदरे स्फुरतु सचिनंदन आजानुलंबित भुजौ कनकतावतौ संकीर्तनैकपितरौ कमलायताक्षौ विश्वम्भरौ युगवरौ द्विजधर्मपालौ वंदे जगत्प्रियकरौ करुणावतारौ। Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone today evening for our it's a Jagannath Mishra festival today, celebrating the appearance of Lord Chaitanya, which was yesterday. So I thought of taking this particular topic for discussion, Mahaprabhu and Varnasrama. At the face of it, it looks as if this particular topic, if you consider Varnashram, it seems as if Mahaprabhu rejected Varnashram. So we wish to start from that particular point. Okay, so if you see the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 8, which is the conversation of Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Rai, Mahaprabhu is asking Ramananda Rai, Prabhu kahe pada shloka sadhyera nirnaya, is asking him, what is, tell me a shloka or tell me something which talks about the conclusion of everything that is achievable. Sadhyera. Rai kahe swadharma charane Vishnu bhakti hoya. So Ramananda Rai says that the practicing one swadharma, one achieves the feet of Lord Vishnu. Okay, and then Ramananda Rai quotes that famous verse, Varnasrama acharavat purushena parapuman Vishnor aradyate pantha nanya tattosha karanam. Okay, so this particular verse, which is from the Puranas, it says that the whole purpose of Varnasrama is to please Lord Vishnu, and it has no other purpose. So he quotes this particular verse as the verse which talks about the conclusion of all scripture. Then we know in text 59, the Lord says, Prabhu kahe eho bahya, aage kaho ar. He says that this is external, please say something further. And then Rai says, Krishna kamarpana sarva sadhyasar. Then Ramananda Rai says that, quotes that yat karosi yadashna siva, saying that whatever one does, one should offer it to Krishna. Then of course Mahaprabhu rejects that also, saying eho bahya. And then he talks about sarva dharman and then goes on and on and on. And finally, when Ramananda Rai talks about bhakti, which is untinged by any karma and jnana, then only Lord Chaitanya says, this is all right, but still tell me something higher. And ultimately, he takes Ramananda Rai to the discussion of the love of Srimati Radharani and the gopis for Krishna. So in this conversation, if you see at the beginning at least, the first thing quoted by Ramananda Rai is about Varnashram, saying that Varnashram is something that pleases the Lord and it is to be done in the spirit of offering to Vishnu or Krishna. But Mahaprabhu says that eho bahya. Now, we need to understand this, that eho bahya in this particular context doesn't mean you don't practice it. What it means is one should not be stuck there. Okay, so that is actually what Mahaprabhu is telling him. So eho bahya. So the thing is, when someone hears the story, the background of the person is very important. If I speak this story or this particular shloka with a hippie background, then what I say changes. I may come to the conclusion that eho bahya means this is not at all needed or you need not practice it. Suddenly that's not what Lord Chaitanya is saying here. That's not what is being meant here. What he means is don't get stuck there. You need to go ahead. So today what we will do is we will see Mahaprabhu's, several stories from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life itself. where we see clearly how he himself very carefully practiced the whatever regulations of Varnashram were there very carefully throughout his life. There was never a compromise on that. Okay. So we will start with some particular stories which illustrate this particular point. So the first thing is, if you see Lord Chaitanya, the first one I want to take is from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, where Vrindavan Das Thakur says, Dharma Sanatana Prabhu Sthape Sarva Dharma, Loka Raksha Lagi Prabhu Na Lagena Karma. As Sanatana Dharma himself, so Vrindavan Das Thakur gives the name to Lord Chaitanya as Sanatana Dharma. He says that Lord Chaitanya was Sanatana Dharma and he established the principles of religion in order to protect people's religious principles, and he would never tolerate any transgressions. Okay, so this is a very interesting verse from the 15th chapter of Adi Kanta Chaitanya Bhagavat. And there is this beautiful story of how when Nimai Pandit, when he was a teacher in the Gurukul, not in the Gurukul, rather, he would teach grammar. So that particular point of time, it is said that if any student came without tilak, then the Lord wouldn't appreciate it. So there is this whole story that is because the idea was that a person had to wear tilak before his morning worship, which is called as Sandhya. And if any student came without wearing the tilak, then it indicated that for some reason he has not done his Sandhya and he has just come directly to the Patashala. That is what it would indicate. And Lord Chaitanya would be very heavy with that person. Have a look here. Prabhu bole kena boy kapale tomara tilakana dahi deki ke ne ki yukti tara. Mahaprabhu is saying, oh brother, why don't I see tilak on your forehead? What is your explanation? The Vedas say that if a Brahmana's forehead is not decorated with tilaka, it is as good as a crematorium. I can therefore understand that you have not done your morning Sandhya. Therefore, brother, your morning has become fruitless. So Mahaprabhu is concluding that Aji tumi nahi kari Sandhya. You have not done what you were supposed to do in the morning and you have just directly come to the school. Chala Sandhya kar agiya grahe punarbhara Sandhya kari tabe se asi hapadibhara. Go back home, perform your morning duties. Then only you should come to study. Ye mata prabhura yate ka aiche shishya gana sabe atyanta nija dharma parayana. Vrindavan Das Thakur says that in this way, Mahaprabhu's students were very conscientious about performing their religious duties. Okay, and nobody, and it is said that Mahaprabhu wouldn't, and this was, at least in the story, much before he became a quote-unquote devotee. He would be very careful with it. And also it is said that he would never joke with other women. Okay, so this is also part of Varnashram. So when we say Varnashram, it is about the samskaras, the daily rituals, and it is also about interacting with the opposite sex carefully. So it is said, Sab par striya prati nahi parihasa tride ki dure prabhu hoye na ekapasha. It is said that he never joked with other women, and as soon as he saw a woman coming, he would immediately give her ample room to pass without talking. Okay, so this is all Nimai Pandit, mind you. So this is a 17-year-old boy whom we are seeing in action in Navadvip. And so whatever stories we know of Mahaprabhu as Lord Chaitanya in his childhood, where he would like there is that other famous story, right? How he would go to the Ganga and some girls would be worshipping Shiva. He would tell that I am Shiva. Why don't you give all these offerings to me? So these stories actually happened when he was a boy. Okay, so one needs to note this very carefully. Okay, because as a child, one may like children interact very freely with everybody, correct? But once you are adolescent, then you should be very careful about how you mix with the opposite sex. And this is very clear in the story. So you will see in the chapters before, when he was a child, he would sit on the lap of so many ladies who were the neighbors of Sachimata and all that. But that was all when he was a very small boy. Okay. But these are the chapters which are discussing Nimai Pandit as a scholar in Navadvip, which was typically when he was 15 to 18 in that age group. Okay. And in that age group, it is said that he would never joke with any woman. Okay. So these are some simple examples about how he would actually follow the duties of the ashrama. Now, and this was not only before he became a quote unquote devotee, it was even after he had taken sannyas. Okay, so if you just in Chaitanya Charitamrita, if you go to the index behind and you just look at the word Madhyana, there are at least 24 verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that talk about Madhyana. Okay, so I'm just reading one. Madhyana karite Prabhu chalile apane Ishwara dekhiya kali dibena darshane. So like this, you will see at least 20 plus verses. Okay, these are all Lord Chaitanya as a sannyasi, mind you, in Jagannath Puri. In the verse that I just read, it is said, because he had to perform his noon duties, Prabhupada says, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got up to live, but it was settled that the following day, after he saw Jagannath, he would return to visit Haridas Thakur. Okay, so now obviously the question will be, what are these noon duties? So it is very well understood that every Brahman had to do the Trikala Sandhya, that is morning, afternoon, and evening, which basically involved a set of prayers, which involved the Gayatri as the crux of it, and also prayers to the Surya Narayana or Varuna or the various directions, Paschima, and the four directions have to be offered respects, etc. So this is said to be a Brahman's daily duty, and even a sannyasi is supposed to do it. And if you see the Chaitanya Charitamrita, at least there are 20 mentions about this, which indicates that he followed the rules of Varnasrama even as a sannyasi. And this was even when he was absorbed in highest ecstasy of love of God. Okay, so even at that time, see, please try to understand, when someone is at such a high level, generally he can actually go beyond it. Okay, so for example, if you see Madhavendra Puri, he was also a sannyasi, but he was in the highest stage of sannyas called Paramahamsa. And Madhavendra Puri, it is said that he had bid goodbye to all this. In fact, there is a very famous verse also. There is Sandhya Vandana Bhadravastu Mavato Bosnana Tubhyam Namo. Bo Deva Pitaras Tarsatarpana Vidau Naham Kshama Kshamyatam. So basically, Madhavendra Puri, he says in this particular verse that I can't do any of these rituals, the Starpana, the Sandhya, all these things, this taking of bath at the right time. Okay, so all these regulations are there in Varnashram for a Brahmana, including a sannyasi. But Madhavendra Puri was at the stage of Paramahamsa level, so he would say that I can't really do this. He says that very clearly. But surprisingly, if you see the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu, he was also absorbed in ecstasy, etc. But as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that a self-realized person has no duties to do, and hence Madhavendra Puri is perfect in giving up all those regulations which are supposed to be technically done by a sannyasi. But still, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter, that when I come to this world, I always stick to the duties of Varnashram. He says that, right? Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter, between text 17 and 24. He basically starts by saying that a self-realized has nothing to do, but he says that still he must do to set an example. And he says, I myself have nothing to give and take with this world, but whenever I come to this world, I always stick to the duties to set an example to the world. So we know those series of verses. And we can see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that as a sannyasi, he was sticking to, this dharma of a Brahmana. And this was just not one thing. If you see again, he practiced everything related to what Varnashram demanded from a sannyasi. Okay, so if you see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are so many stories on this. Like for example, it is the rule that a sannyasi can eat only from the house of a Brahmana. Brahmana in this context also means someone who is born in a Brahmana family. Okay, so this is a regulative principle in a sannyasi as per Varnashram, standard Varnashram. Okay, so they can't eat any other place. Okay, in fact, if you see many of the sannyasis of all other sampradaya, like I recently heard that this Pejawar Mat Swami from Udupi, he had one Brahmana cook and he ate only food cooked by him for some 50 plus years. Okay, so you can imagine the kind of consistency in the sannyasi's life, right? Because you're just always eating only food cooked by one specific Brahmana. Okay, and you see that in Lord Chaitanya's Leela also very clearly. He would never violate that rule. There was only one place where he apparently, that also was not such a big violation, but I'm just reading that story that will just tell us where he violated or, under what conditions. So the story is from the 18th chapter of the Madhya Leela Chaitanya Charitamrita, 17th chapter, where Mahaprabhu is in Mathura and in the Keshavji Mandir, he's dancing in ecstasy. As he's dancing in ecstasy, it is said that one Brahmana joins the dancing. And that Brahmana is dancing along with Lord Chaitanya. Both are holding their hands and they are chanting in ecstasy the names of Lord Krishna. Okay. And when people saw that particular dance, everyone was thinking, oh, this is so wonderful. How this sannyasi and this Brahmana are dancing. And Mahaprabhu started laughing, crying, dancing. He exhibited all the ecstasy symptoms and all that, right? After all this dance and chanting was over, it is said that Mahaprabhu took this Brahman to a solitary place and questioned him. You're an elderly Brahman, you're sincere and advanced in spiritual life. How come did you get this ecstasy of Krishna consciousness? Because this was some Brahman from Mathura who had just come and who started dancing with Lord Chaitanya. Vipra kahe Shripad Madhavendra Puri, Brahmite Oila Mathura Nagari. That Brahmana said, Madhavendra Puri had come to my town long back. Kripa kari ten hamora nilaya oila, mora shisha kari mora hate bhiksha haila. While at Mathura, Madhavendra Puri visited my house and accepted me as a disciple. He also took lunch in my house. So he said that, so this Brahmana said that Madhavendra Puri had come to my house. He initiated me and he also took lunch at my house. And then he told him about everything about Madhavendra Puri. As soon as Mahaprabhu heard about Madhavendra Puri's relationship with this Brahman, Mahaprabhu started offering obeisances to that Brahman because Mahaprabhu saw him as the god brother of his Guru, Ishvara Puri. Correct? And that Brahmana became very fearful and he was wondering, why is this sannyasi offering me respect? And at that particular time, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who was the cook and assistant of Lord Chaitanya, he told this Brahman about the relationship between Madhavendra Puri and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then the Brahman became very pleased. He understood, oh, the sannyasi is a disciple of Ishvara Puri. And in this way, we are all related in the spiritual relationship. Then it is said this Brahman took Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his house and began to serve him in various ways. Now look at this carefully. Text 176. Vikshalage Bhattacharya Karila Randhana Tave Mahaprabhu Hasi Balila Vachana. So this Brahman, what he did, he invited Mahaprabhu to his house and he told Balabhadra Bhattacharya, you please cook for him. Okay. Now we need to understand why this Brahman is saying like this. This Brahman is saying like this because in those times, this was very strict rule that the sannyasi would eat only in the house of a Brahmana. Now what happened with this Brahmana was, among the Brahmins, this Brahmana's jati was considered inferior. And that reason is given in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because he belonged to the Sanodya Brahmin community. Now, who is the Sanodya Brahmin community? So, Prabhupada explains in the purport that there are three types of Vaishyas in North India. One is the Agarwal, one is Kalavar, and one is Chanavada. Now, in that it is said this Kalavar and Chanavada Vaishyas, they were considered Vaishyas who were who would make liquor, etc. They were involved with liquor trade. If you Google this, I try to find out, I just tried to Google Kalavara Vaishya caste, and I found out that yes, till many years ago, this particular jati of Vaishyas, they were involved in manufacturing liquor and selling liquor. Now, the Sanodya Brahmin community were Brahmanas for this particular caste of Vaishyas. Okay, so they were Brahmanas. They were not involved in making liquor, etc. But they would do the rituals and everything for this category of Vaishya community. And because of that, sannyasis would not take food in their house, cooked by them. Okay, so this was the rule at that time. Okay, and Mahaprabhu is basically saying that Yadyapi Sanodya Haile Saiti Brahmana Sanodya Kare Sannyasi Nakare Bhojana. And in such Brahmana's house, sannyasis would not take. But Mahaprabhu is telling this Brahmana, Puri gosai tomare gara karyache bhiksha, more tumi bhiksha deha yei more shiksha. Mahaprabhu said that, but because Madhavendra Puri took food cooked by your hands, I can follow in his footsteps. Okay, so please try to understand this. I mean, you have to really appreciate the entire social order over here to get this particular point. You know, because for us, perhaps none of it is making much sense or difference. So most of us may feel, come on, what's the big deal about this? No, those days that Varnashram was so strictly followed that first of all, a sannyasi wouldn't take in anybody's house like that. If he had to take in anybody's house, it had to be only in someone who was born as a Brahmana. Sanodya Brahmins, even though they are Brahmins, because they are guides of such Vaishyas who are involved in liquor industry, though they themselves are not involved like that, technically no sannyasi would accept. That was the culture, that was the Varnashram system. But because Madhavendra Puri had bypassed that rule and had taken food cooked by the Sanodya Brahmana, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that I will take food cooked by you. So, okay, otherwise the standard protocol, please remember, was that whenever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to somebody's house, if that person was not a born Brahmana, okay, whoever he may be, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, who was a Brahmana and who was accompanying him, or some other Brahman who was Mahaprabhu's servant at that time, cook. They would cook in their house and offer food. Are you getting this point? So this is something, this is very clear in Chaitanya Charitamrita. You will see so many places this particular reference. If you read ahead, if you, for example, go to the Antyalila, there is this whole 10th chapter about Lord Chaitanya accepting food at the prasad at the home of his devotees. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, Acharya Rete Acharya Nidhi Nandana Raghava Srivasadi Yatabhakta Viprasabha. So whether it was Acharya Ratna or Pundrik Vidyanidhi or Nandanacharya, Raghava Pandit, these people, Srivas Thakur, Advaita Acharya, these people were all Vipra by Jati. That means they were all Brahmins by birth. And Mahaprabhu would eat food cooked by them, Sarva Bhattacharya, all these people. But on the other hand, in the next verse, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, Yei mata nimantrana karena yatna kari Vasudeva Gadadhar Dasa Gupta Murari Kulina Grami Khandavasi Arayata Jana Jagannatera Prasada Ani Kari Nimantrana. So in the next verse, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, on the other hand, there were so many other Vaishnavas who are not born as Brahmanas, whether it is Vasudeva Das, Gadadhar Das, Murari Gupta, Srikhanda, that is Raghunandan Thakur, and so many others. It is said that when Mahaprabhu would go to their house, the system was that they would buy prasad from Jagannath temple and they would feed him. Okay, but they couldn't cook and serve. Otherwise, somebody like Balabhadra Bhattacharya had to cook in their house and serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay. And so all this to most modern people or even devotees may seem very confusing. Why he's doing like this? In fact, in today's times, if somebody were to do like this, people actually feel bad also, right? Somebody comes home and says that I cannot eat food cooked by you, but I will cook in your house, or my assistant will cook in your house, and that only I will eat. If somebody says like that, it would be scorned down upon, or people will say that this person is crazy or something. But we need to appreciate that 500 years back, or perhaps even 100 years back in India, this was the system of Varnashram. A Brahmin, he couldn't take food cooked by anybody. So all the point I'm trying to highlight here is that Mahaprabhu stringently followed the Varnashram system at that time. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. So though in his talks to, as I said in the beginning, though in his talks to our Ramanandra, he said, Eho Bhashya, this is external. Though he said it is external, it is not external in the sense that it is not to be followed, it is to be given up. It is external in the sense that just doing that is not going to make you a devotee. Okay. Okay, but at that particular time, and this is how India has been always. So you understand this historical fact also, if you read the CC and Chaitanya Lila carefully, that people followed all these regulations. And it's very clear in the story. Okay, so that's why I quoted all these stories here. Okay, so if you remember, I started quoting about his the Sandhya, the Madhyana, and how he would eat, etc. Now going ahead, and he followed all other rules of sannyasi. So for example, there are rules like a sannyasi cannot hear or see a woman. This is a very strict rule. Please try to understand. This rule was so strict that even in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, 100 years back in India, it is said that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would give lecture, there was a parda, a curtain in the temple hall. Okay, and the woman would be on the other side of the parda, the curtain. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would obviously see only the men. The women, they would be on the other side of the parda. He couldn't even see them. Even when they would take initiation, it is said that when they would come to take initiation from him, there would be a parda separating in front of the woman and Saraswati Thakur. Okay. And they had to basically, they couldn't see him, or he couldn't see them while giving the name or whatever. So this was Varnashram. Okay. This was Varnashram. And all these people followed it. Okay. There was no question that they did not follow. And Mahaprabhu also, he wouldn't even hear the name of a woman. Now, this is very surprising because that was the system of Varnashram. In front of a sannyasi, you couldn't tell that this woman's name is so and so. They were not supposed to hear the name. Okay, so there is the story of this sweet maker whose name was Parameshwara. So he comes, he's a simple Bengali devotee. He comes, and when he comes, what happens is Mahaprabhu is asking, how are you? Parameshwara Kushala ho, Bala ho, ila ila. He tells him, are you okay? Are you comfortable, Parameshwara? Very nice that you came. So what that fellow said, Mukundara Mata Asiya Cheseha Prabhu Kahila. He said, Mukundara Mata has also come. So this was a way in which they would address their wife. Okay, so obviously what we understand is that Mukunda is the child of Parameshwara. And what he's basically telling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that Mukunda's mother has also come. Basically, they wouldn't say that my missus has come or whatever. So this was a standard way in which they would address their wife, Mukundera Mata. So it is said even this much on hearing, Mukundera Mata Nama Suni Prabhu Sankocha Hoila Tatapi Tahara Preeti Kichuna Bolila. On hearing this, that Parameshwara is saying that Mukundera Mata has come, Prabhu Sankocha Hoila. The Lord became a little guarded. But out of love, he did not say anything. Because it is said that it was a violation of etiquette. You couldn't tell a sannyasi that such and such woman has come. Okay, so my purpose of saying all this is that Mahaprabhu himself practiced Varnashram very carefully. There was no question that he did not. Another aspect of Varnashram, which Lord Chaitanya followed, is in terms of samskaras. If you see in Chaitanya Bhagavat, right from his childhood, all the samskaras were done in detail by his parents for him. Okay, so see, let's try to understand. Varnasrama means what actually? Varnasrama means it's not just, many times you think Varnasrama means just living with a family or doing your job properly. No, it means sticking to your Varna duty. That means your occupational duty. And ashram means following all samskaras carefully. This was all part of Varnashram, and doing all the rituals which are part of your ashram. Okay, so because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born in a Brahmana family, he had to do all this Sandhya and all that, which he was doing 3 times a day. Okay. But besides that, the point is, he was also, all the samskaras were done for him. If you see the Chaitanya Bhagavat, all those details are given, and it's very wonderful to see this. How, in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's house also, this whole culture was there, where all kinds of, rituals and ceremonies were observed. Okay, so for example, it is said that Sachimata would invite ladies home. Like nowadays we hear, ladies call for Haldi Kumkum, we hear, right? Sometimes in Maharashtra, they call for Haldi Kumkum. So you see that in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So it is said that Sachimata would distribute roasted paddy, bananas, mustard oil, vermilion, betel nut and pan to the ladies who would come. Okay, he would invite all the ladies to their house, and he would give all these things. So it just mentions it. That's one thing. And then even all the other samskaras. For example, it is said that when the child was, so the Namakarana was done. In great detail, the Namakarana samskara is described. Then the ear piercing of the ear, shaving of the head. Then the beginning of education. Okay, the sacred ceremony. All these samskaras are discussed in detail in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Detail as in Jagannath Mishra would find a suitable day. It says in Chaitanya Bhagavat, for all these samskaras, he would find a suitable day. Suitable day means according to astrology, a particular suitable time in which everything had to be done. You know, that was samskar, right? You had to do it on a particular day. It's not that some random day you begin your education. They would see a nice day and appropriate Vedic mantras would be chanted, and then that ceremony would begin. So this was how Varnashram was being. So this is samskaras. And along with samskaras, another thing you see in Chaitanya Leela, that even the environment at that time was, all these people would do, you know, various rituals and connect to various goddesses, etc., for the betterment of their children and family. So, for example, in Chaitanya Mangal, this particular story comes, of Shakti Puja. So in Bengal, this is a local tradition in Bengal where there is Shakti is a female deity. She's like one expansion of Durga Devi or whatever you can imagine, and she's in charge of taking care of children. Okay, so that's how they look at it. So the Shakti Devi is protects children. So it is said Sachimata, along with all the other women in Navadvip, she would worship the Shakti Devi for the blessing. Shashimata would do it for the protection of Nimai. And then there's a beautiful story is there where Sachimata is going along with Sandesh and bananas to offer to that Shakti Devi. And Gaura Hari, what he does is he says, oh, I'm feeling very hungry right now. Immediately I want food, something to eat. And Sachimata says that just don't worry, I will offer it to Shakti Devi and then I will give you. Then he says, no, I can't wait. And I'm too hungry right now. My stomach is burning with hunger. I can't wait any amount of time. And he immediately pulls all the sweets from Sachimata's hands and he pops them into his mouth. Of course, Sachimata becomes very angry, but then Mahaprabhu says that, see, I know everything. And if you pour water on the tree, then the entire tree becomes nourished. And, he just speaks all this philosophy. Sachimata really doesn't understand what he's talking. And they're just laughing and the child runs away. Okay, so I'm quoting the story to basically say that this was the kind of environment in which Nimai Pandit grows up, where all kind of observances are made very carefully by their parents and also by the surrounding people. Okay, that story is there in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, of all the girls who are worshipping Lord Shiva to get a good husband. And of course, he's a small boy at that time, he's joking with them, and eventually he's very pleased with all those girls and he blesses them that you will all have very nice husbands and all that. Okay, so these things also you see very carefully in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life throughout. Okay, so though he said all this to be external as part of his discussion with Ramananda, that's what I'm trying to focus. But in society, all this was followed, and that's the reason why. Now, again, many times people ask this also, why the Goswamis who wrote so much literature, they never wrote anything about Varnashram so much, what has to be done, etc. The reason is simple, because till 100 years back in India, the system was so well functioning by and large that nobody had to write about it. That means people would do their duties very carefully. It would rarely happen that like a Brahmana would eat outside here and there. These things would never happen. Prabhupada also writes in one place that it would never happen. People would follow their Varna Dharma, Ashram Dharma very carefully. So there was no need to write. Okay, there was no need to write. It would never happen that a Brahmana or any other member of the Varna system wouldn't do what they were supposed to do, the kind of rituals, the kind of puja, the shraddha ceremony. Everyone would do all these things, okay? Because the system was tight. So that's why all the acharyas in their writings, they could peacefully just talk about love of Krishna, because it was assumed that you are doing your Varnashram Dharma carefully. These were simply part of life, and no one had to basically, right? No one had to, no one had to specifically point out that it must be done. Okay, but today it's a different game altogether. Today it's a different game where, even simple things need to be told sometimes to people, right? For example, there was some, recently we had this case, there was some lady who lost a very close relative, but she was continuing with deity worship or something. Okay, and she was, so for example, many times people ask this question, right? If someone has passed away at home or something, is it that 13 days we should stop the worship? Can't we just continue? The Goswamis did not say anything about it. The point is, nobody said, because there was no question that anybody would do something like that. Correct? I mean, this question itself, because that mourning period, I'm just giving a simple example. This is again part of the rituals of Varnasrama. It was something that was assumed that everybody is going to practice. There was no question that where somebody would ask such a thing. My father is dead or whatever, and is it that 10 days I cannot really come to the temple or what? Nobody would ask such a question because there was no question that you would do it. Okay, it was assumed that yes, this is there only. Why are you even asking this? So what has happened in today's time is things have become a lot topsy-turvy, and that's why we sometimes need to discuss such points. Now, going ahead a little bit more on this particular thing, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, again, if you see, though he was in such a high level of devotional absorption, but he was also following so many rules carefully, right? Like two stories come to my mind in Chaitanya Charitamrita. One is the story of how there is this woman, Devi Dasi, who's singing very beautifully some Gita Govinda or some song in praise of Krishna. And Mahaprabhu is in ecstasy and he's running towards the origin of the sound. And Govinda has understood that the person who is singing is a woman. So Govinda is running behind Lord Chaitanya. It's such a beautiful story. And we can just imagine that in Jagannath Puri, there is this woman sitting somewhere and singing very loudly and sweetly about Krishna. And Mahaprabhu is in complete, right? So as a Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Mahaprabhu had three types of consciousness. One was internal, one was external, and one was semi-external. So many times Mahaprabhu was in complete internal consciousness. He would not understand what is going on outside. So even though it was a woman who was singing, Lord Chaitanya is running towards her. He's hurting himself, running on all the thorns, shrubs, everything. And finally, as he's about to get close to that woman, Govinda holds him and shouts, "It is a woman singing." And the moment Govinda said it, Mahaprabhu stops immediately. He comes to complete external consciousness. And he says that you saved my life, because had I touched her, I would have immediately died, he said. Okay. So one may say that, oh, come on, he's in such an internal consciousness, even if we touched, I mean, what would he perceive, right? No, that's not the point. The point is a sannyasi cannot touch a woman. Okay, so that rule is very strict. So that's why Lord Chaitanya is saying that had I touched her, I would have died. There was no question, I would have kept my life. Okay. Similarly, you see that with that Shankar Pandit also, right? The story of Shankar Pandit. Shankar Pandit is a security guard at Mahaprabhu's room in Gambhira, and his purpose was to ensure that Mahaprabhu in the middle of the night doesn't run away in ecstasy. Correct? So that is why Shankar Pandit was appointed by the devotees. Now, a security guard, whoever it is, whether it is ordinary security guard in our society or whether it is a devotee, they will fall asleep at night. So Shankar Pandit, most of the time, it is said that he will fall asleep only. And Mahaprabhu was in, most of the time at night, he would be in the deep internal consciousness where he would be rubbing his nose against the wall, bleeding, exhibiting all kinds of ashtavikar and, which nobody has seen in this world. The symptoms of what we call as Mahabhav. But it is said that when he would see Shankar Pandit fall asleep, he would immediately put a blanket on him. If you just think about it, right, it is so, putting a blanket on someone who's sleeping is, in a sense, is so mundane. It's so external, as in it's something so much for the body, right, that at night you want a blanket on yourself. And here is Mahaprabhu, who is lost in thoughts of Radha, Krishna in Vrindavan and the mood of gopis, etc. But I'm giving you these examples to basically say that though he was absorbed in so much of devotional reality, he would never forget that technical reality of things, right? They don't cancel each other. Just like, for example, we see in Bhagavad Gita 8th chapter, Krishna is talking about, if you see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking about the devotional reality and technical reality also, correct? Technical reality means Krishna is saying that you should pass away. The yogi who passes away in this particular time of the waxing moon, Uttarayana, in the daytime, such a person attains me, and the yogi who passes during the Dakshinayana, waning period of the moon, so on and so forth, they do not come back. I mean, they come back to the world. Correct. So these are technical realities that Krishna is talking about. Krishna also talks about the devotional reality, that somebody who is in my consciousness, who is focused in me, for whom these rules do not apply. So Krishna has put that waiver. But you will see in Lord Chaitanya's life that he never went against the technical rules, correct? For example, Rup Sanatan were there in Jagannath Puri, or Haridas Thakur was there. They were not allowed in the Jagannath temple. Mahaprabhu never interfered in all these technical details. He never, there's no comment about it where he's saying that, oh, it is not correct that somebody as great as Haridas Thakur is not allowed in the temple. Because these were technical rules which were there in society, correct? It was part of the Varnasrama system where, whatever, you're not born in the Sanatana Dharma system, you're not allowed inside. And nowadays, sometimes we make a hue and cry about it, but if you see Lord Chaitanya, he never said anything about it. He never objected to it. He never said the system is correct. He and his followers basically followed the system of the world. That's what I want to say. Okay. So this is something we need to understand. Yes, certainly at some times, there were points in Chaitanya Leela where you will see that Mahaprabhu is unable to, because of his so much deep internal consciousness, he is unable to follow the external rules very carefully. That also we will see. And for that, I will quote one particular story. Okay, so this is a beautiful story actually. And this story illustrates this particular point, that how when someone is very absorbed in devotional service, what we call technically as Bhava Samadhi. So let's remember, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was situated in what is called as Bhava Samadhi. Bhava Samadhi means the Mahabhava of Radharani, right? Where it's a very deep state of ecstasy. And in that particular state, certain things he couldn't do. Okay, for example, he couldn't do his Varna Dharma of teaching. Okay, so we all know that Mahaprabhu, as Nimai Pandit, he was a teacher of grammar, right? And that story is very beautiful. If you go into the details of the story in Chaitanya Bhagavat, okay, so I'll just read some part of that story and then we will discuss on that. Okay, the story is from Chaitanya Bhagavat chapter 1, Madhyakand, where Mahaprabhu is a teacher of grammar. Okay, Siddha Varna Samanaya Bale Shishyagana Prabhukahe Sarva Varna Siddha Narayana. The students are asking him, what is the meaning of Siddha Varna Samanaya? So this is something in grammar in Sanskrit. And Mahaprabhu is saying, Sarva Varna Siddha Narayana. Narayana is situated in every alphabet. Shishya Bole Varna Siddhi Haile Kemone. The students are asking, how are the letters of the alphabet perfected? Prabhu Bole Krishna Drishti Patera Karane. Because of the glance of Krishna, all the letters of the alphabet are perfected. Now look at how the students are responding. Shishya Bole Pandita Uchita Vyakyakara. Prabhu Bole Sarvakshana Shri Krishna Smarana. The students are saying, oh Pandita, please explain properly. They were ordinary students. So they said that please explain to us properly. Lord replied, every moment remember Krishna. Then the Lord said, I am explaining to you about the worship of Krishna, which is the beginning, middle, and end of all Vedic literature. Hearing the Lord's explanation, students began to laugh. Some remarked, it appears as if he is affected by an imbalance of Vayu. The students asked, where did you get this explanation? The Lord replied, this is the verdict of all the scriptures. Okay. So hearing all this, the students laughed and they went away. And what the students did, they reported to Gangadas Pandit everything that had happened. So please try to understand, Gangadas Pandit was the teacher of Lord Chaitanya, right? So he went and told him that, see, this person is not explaining anything properly to us. He's just, anything you ask him, he's just saying, this is Narayana, this is Krishna. He's giving a very devotional explanation to everything. We are not understanding grammar. Okay. And he told, so the students give many examples to him. He says that every day he takes the dhatu. So there is something called dhatu in Sanskrit grammar. And the students tell Gangadas Pandit that he starts with dhatu and finally he says that all dhatus are in Krishna. And this is how he's teaching. Hearing the students' word, Gangadas Pandit started laughing. Gangadas said, don't worry, go home. Tomorrow I will tell him properly. He will teach you well. Okay, then the students went home, they were happy. Then Lord Gangadas Pandit called Nimai Pandit and he told him that, my dear Vishwambara, please hear my words. The studying of a Brahmana is not the result of being less fortunate. Okay, so see, Gangadas Pandit gives very amazing kind of instruction. He tells him, your maternal grandfather is Neelambar Chakravarti and your father is Jagannath Mishra. There are no fools in material or there are no fools in your maternal or paternal family. Okay, and you yourself are most qualified to explain the commentary. If by giving up studies one becomes a devotee, your father and grandfather, were they not devotees? So Gangadas Pandit uses this logic. He tells him that, see, Jagannath Mishra, Neelambar Chakravarti, they knew everything, grammar, everything, and they were teaching properly only. Right? They did not have to connect everything to Krishna like that, or just say any question you ask, Krishna is the reply to that question. Okay. So please do your duty properly. This is how he tells it. And the Lord says, yes, I will do, he says. Okay. Very interesting, this whole conversation. Huh? So he says, yes, I will do. He offers respects to Gangadas Pandit and he leaves. Then next day, he again starts his school saying that, come on, I'm going to teach you all grammar the way nobody can defeat me. He goes into his previous mood of scholarly past tense. And all the students are very happy. They think that, yes, they have got our teacher back. Then what happens is that at that particular time, there was one devotee whose name was Ratnagarbha Acharya, who was sitting there, where Lord Nimai Pandit was talking to the students. And this person, what he started doing, he started reciting some verses from Bhagavatam. When he recited those verses from Bhagavatam about Krishna, at that time, Mahaprabhu just fell into ecstasy, Nimai Pandit. He started rolling on the ground and ecstatically his hairs were standing on end, tears were flowing from his eyes, and he was like completely, he was in another world only of Mahabharata, correct? Then what happened is they started the grammar class. Now you can imagine what would have happened. In the grammar class, he was talking only about Krishna to his students, correct? Anything the students would ask about grammar, he again, though he said, after meeting Gangadas Pandit, I will teach you properly, but he couldn't. He started teaching everything, okay? Then what happened is, then he comes to external consciousness after some time. Then the Lord is asking, was my explanation correct? Did you all understand everything properly? Right? Because Mahaprabhu would be in internal consciousness for a long time and suddenly would come to external consciousness. One student replies very interesting. He says, whatever you explained is correct, but the aim for which we are studying is different. So the students also understood, yes, in the ultimate sense, what he's saying is correct. Everything is Krishna only. That part we have understood. Because obviously they were also kind of devotees only. But they said, why we have come to study, that is different purpose. Then Mahaprabhu finally tells these students that I cannot, and this happens for 10 consecutive days actually. And then finally the Lord says, your studies have been held up for 10 days because of me. Okay. Then the student says, no, what you're saying is correct in one sense, because you're connecting everything to Krishna, though that's not what we have come here to study. The Lord told, I apologize to all of you. From now onwards, I will not be able to teach you. Okay. Please study from some other teacher. Okay. Because as far as I am concerned, I just get lost in this ecstasy. This story, if you see now, it's very illustrative. The story, there are many things you understand. First thing is that if someone is so much in love of God, they actually become dysfunctional in society, correct? I mean, they cannot function in society in a very normal way. Okay. It's just like a girl who falls in love with a boy. She just runs away, gives up her parents. They get dysfunctional in society. So one who is at that level of love, they cannot function in a material sense. And that's what Mahaprabhu honestly tells the boys, that I can't teach you people. So you please learn from someone else. And interestingly, he didn't tell them to stop studying. Okay, he didn't tell them that all this is totally useless, you just stop studying completely. No, he doesn't say that. He only says that I can't teach you, you please learn from someone else. Okay, so why this is also important, what this also indicates is that yes, Mahaprabhu, because of his such a superior position of Mahabhava, he couldn't function in that Varna as a Brahmin teacher, correct, properly. And that is very clear. He had to give up that duty. But he didn't make that into a system where he said that nobody should study grammar. See, that is also very important. So sometimes what happens is people see such a thing and say that, oh, Sanskrit should not be studied. There is no use of studying Sanskrit. I mean, people come up with very, like I remember once one devotee was arguing with me on this point, saying that why should we study Sanskrit, Prabhuji? Prabhupada is given as Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, right? So in that, all the words have been translated into English. It was quite surprising to me, the argument that the devotee raised, because I realized that, oh, you have completely negated the entire purpose of Prabhupada has given the translations that is for people who do not know Sanskrit to understand, but it is nowhere said in the scripture that one need not study only these things, right? Because studying Shiksha, Vyakaran, these are all Vedangas, they are all part of the Vedas. So nobody can ever say that you are not supposed to study these things. Okay, so for those who do not know, or those who, right, for them, such translations are available for Sanskrit, and also the translations are available because Sanskrit verses have multiple meanings, and every Acharya focuses on certain meanings in a particular way. So not only Srila Prabhupada, but even Acharyas before that have given translations of Sanskrit in other languages. But no one has said that you are not supposed to learn these things at all, because this is all part again of Varnasrama. That's what I'm coming to, right? Because they are part of the system of how people get educated and go ahead. Okay, Mahaprabhu couldn't work in that particular domain because of his Mahabhav, but he doesn't stop anybody from doing so. He doesn't stop anybody from doing so. So in fact, I just want to end with this particular point, that not only Mahaprabhu did not stop these kind of things, but also Mahaprabhu, if you see in Jagannath Puri, even today if you see, and even 500 years back, so many people eat fish and all that, right? Even Mahaprabhu came across a fisherman, Sarup Damodar and Mahaprabhu, they came across a fisherman who caught Mahaprabhu in that ecstasy. And that fisherman was also a devotee. That's something amazing. He was chanting one Narsimha mantra. He tells Sarup Damodar that I was chanting Narsimha mantra, and this person gets even more mad, right? But the point is, even those things weren't really stopped or preached against by. So what I'm trying to say is, in Sanatana Dharma, the way it is even a sannyasi understands, or Brahmana understands that there are different people in society, okay, which is made up of the three modes of nature. And unlike Buddhism or Jainism, for example, which says everybody in the whole world should be vegetarian, correct? When they do that, what happens is that Rajoguna gets imbalanced, right? Like a typical Jain is not a Rajoguni person who will fight in the army and all that, okay? So this kind of system were never imposed by any acharyas, if you see. Even if you see in Madhua, close to Udupi, it is said that there is a fisherman colony. I mean, fishermen are there since long time, right? Even in Krishna's Dwaraka, they were fishermen. So in the Madhva Sampradaya, it is said close to the Udupi, there is a fishing town. And some Madhva sannyasi had installed one Matsya Dev for these fishermen community to worship. And one person among that community only would worship that Matsya Dev, who was an ex-fisherman. Now he is not fishing, but he would worship Matsya Dev, and all these fishermen also worship that Matsya deity. Okay, the purpose to say this is that this is how Sanatana Dharma and Varnashram worked. This understanding was there that there are all kinds of people. And a blanket rule was never made for anybody, that everyone would, no one should fish henceforward in Jagannath Puri, or nothing like that is done, you see in the story, right? Mahaprabhu is giving Harinam Sankirtan to everybody, okay, because that is something which even any common man can take, right? But he would discuss philosophy with very few people, with Prakashananda Saraswati, Saram Bhattacharya. He would discuss Rasa Tattva with Sarup Damodar, Ramananda Rai. Very confidential people, he would discuss these high topics. But otherwise, for the common person, he would just give them chanting of the holy name. He wouldn't even get into the details of how they are living their life, because according to Varna and Ashram, they all had different standards that they were following. That's very clear, right? If you see historically also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he would not get into that. So this is how, so many, so I just conclude and maybe just take a couple of questions. So the point we were trying to make today is that the Lord is always a protector of Sanatana Dharma. We saw how in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur calls Mahaprabhu as Sanatana Dharma. Okay. So though in this particular avatar, Mahaprabhu came to inaugurate the Sankirtan movement and not really to establish Varnasrama, etc. But because Varnasrama was being followed very meticulously 500 years back, I said even 100 years back, it was being followed meticulously. So though Mahaprabhu tells Ramananda Rai that this is Bhashya, this is external, it never meant that it was external, means it had nothing to do with lifestyle. No. On the other hand, we discussed in detail how Mahaprabhu followed the rules of Varnasrama carefully. Right? Like I gave example of the Sandhya, the Madhyana. I gave examples of how, eating, where he would eat. Okay, this was very, very clear. He would eat only food cooked by a Brahmana. He would not eat anywhere else. So he was following the rules of Varnasrama very carefully as a sannyasi. Everything, all rules. Even in his grahastha life, he was following. Right? Like we said that in his grahastha life as a teenager, he would never talk to a woman. Okay, he would play with girls and all. That was in a very small age, where he and his friends would do masti in Ganga. Right? Where we hear stories, they would exchange the men and women's clothes and all that. That was when he was a small boy of 6-7 years. But once he becomes 14, 15, he becomes grey with women. Okay, so this is all part of Varnasrama, mind you. Okay, so Varnasrama, I told you, is and it is also about all the samskaras that were followed. Not only Mahaprabhu following all samskaras for himself, but the whole community at that time. If you see Bengal in the 15th century, how rigorously all these pujas and rituals were being followed by everybody. That created a samskar, right? Like when we hear stories of girls worshipping Shiva for a husband, it creates a samskar in them that I need a good husband in my life. And that has an impact on how they see married life completely differently than perhaps what it is when you don't have that samskara. Okay, so we were discussing that this was a society in which he was there, and he followed all those things. I also said that some things he couldn't follow, like his Varna Dharma of teaching grammar. Okay, because of his ecstasy of Mahabharata, he couldn't follow. But he doesn't stop other people from following it. He doesn't say that, hey, all this is useless. Nobody should study grammar henceforward. He doesn't say that. Right? He tells people that, no, you all have to follow that properly. But he himself couldn't because of his Mahabharata ecstasy. He couldn't teach Sanskrit grammar. He left that occupation. But that is not a blanket instruction that he gives to the people in general. And I also said that how he distributed Harinam Sankirtan to everybody. But people in those times lived strictly according to Varna Ashrama regulative principles. And how he didn't get into the details of all that, right? In terms of, okay, there is a why all fishermen are there in Jagannath Puri. Jagannath Puri should be free from all. No, he didn't get into all that. Because he understood, or because that is how Samaj is, right? In society, all such people are there. And interestingly, those people are also some kind of devotees only. Okay, but that part is not even touched in detail. So I took these stories because we need to understand the historical context in which Mahaprabhu played his wonderful pastimes of Mahabharata. Right? Hare Krishna. Any questions? Then we would take some. Yes, Vaibhavanand.
Roji, I have a question.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Who is that? Acha, Abhishek, okay, sorry. Amar Gaur, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Roji, two questions, and not directly what you said, but extending what you said. When we say Sanatan Dharma, there are so many panthas and practices involved in it. What is the bare minimum denomination which makes any faith or any pantha a part of Sanatan Dharma? First. Second question is, Varnashram is a social structure which makes following Sanatan Dharma very easy. It has got nothing to do with achieving the goal of life. While you are here in this Bhautik Jagat, what is the best possible way to live? And it's so designed, you automatically land up, figure out a path suitable for you based on your guna, and you can take it up. But we hear that there are, I think in Bhagavad Gita, there are those who are outside Varnashram Dharma. So then what is the bare minimum denomination which makes you a part of Varnashram Dharma? So these two questions.
Yeah, I'll take the first one first. See, the common thing, denomination behind in Varnashram was samskaras. Let's be very clear about it. Following samskaras was the common thing about everybody. You may be a Shaivite, you may be a Vaishnava, you may be a Shakta. It didn't matter. Okay. For example, when a child is born, the astrological chart is made. You know, all the samskaras, there are 16 samskaras, right? Right from Garbhadan samskar to Vivaha to Antyeshti, correct? And then all the rituals which are to be done by every member. For example, simple examples like fasting, right? So in Varnasrama, all these fasting regulations are there, right? There are different types of fasting, okay? Or these kind of prayers or special pujas done, right? Like a girl achieves puberty, some particular puja is done. A boy at particular age, some sacred ceremony is there for him. In all Varnas, there are these ritualistic ceremonies that are done, which we call today as rituals. Okay, so this was common across everybody. It didn't matter, your pantha did not matter on all this. A Brahman Vaishnava and a Shaivite Vaishnava. Oh, sorry, a Vaishnava Brahman and a Shaivite Brahman. Okay, their difference may be in terms of the tilak they wear. One may wear basma and one may wear Urdhva Pundra. Okay, but the samskaras were same for them. There were so many things that were same for them only. They had to, the rules of Varnashram were same for them. Similarly for the other jatis also. Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, for all of them. Right? In fact, the sacred thread ceremony was there for 3 castes, right? If you see the Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya, all had sacred thread. Increasingly in India today, in the last 100 years, only the Brahmins follow sacred thread ceremony, at least to some detail. But 100 years back, if you see, even the other jatis had that. Even some Shudra jatis had sacred thread ceremony. Like, so these things were there, right? Which people have given up today, unfortunately. And this giving up is not, it's not happened for a very long time. It has happened only in the last 50, 100 years. And this is primarily post-British Raj. But even in the British Raj time, so many things were. So this was common to everybody. So that's the first question that you asked. The second thing that you're asking is about those who are outside of Varnashram, right? Now, if you see carefully, na Prabhuji, even those who are so-called outside, like for example, if you see the tribal community, even though these people are so-called outside, now it didn't mean that they didn't have samskaras. They had samskaras, they had rituals. You know, I will never forget this. 2 things I would quote to you. One is the Yogi Adityanath, one chief secretary was there. Previous chief secretary, not the current one. His wife, she was one Mishra, one Brahmin lady. She did a lot of survey of this tribal community in Uttar Pradesh. And there is a writing also. I had seen or heard that long time back. If I get reference, I'll post it also. So this lady, what she says is how in all tribal communities, they have worship, they have methods of doing things. Okay. Like I also remember when I had gone to Vada last year, I had been to GV. That time close to GV, we went to Palghar, to one place where one leader of a tribal community had come. Varli, he was teaching us how the Varli paintings are to be done. He was talking about the lifestyle of the tribal community in Palghar. And if you hear that, it was so amazing. He would say things like how cows are so important for them. He would say that cows are so important in our tribal community that if by mistake a cow dies, right, under some tribal person, then he has to promise in front of the whole community that next time he will take care of the cow better. Otherwise, he is banished from the community for negligence and killing of a cow. He was telling us how their marriages were held. He was telling us that they're primarily vegetarian. This tribal person was saying very rarely, once a year, they would do some, bali to some goddess, and that meat they would eat. This was a tribal person who was telling. It was not that, and he was not an ISKCON guy or a converted. No, so he was telling that how he's working with all these tribals, telling them that we should follow our culture. You know, he was saying that, Krishna is the god in our tribal community in this Maharashtra, in that Varli community. Varli is a tribal community. Okay. So basically, why I'm saying this is, it is not that these tribals, they had their own cultural, ways of doing things, which in the ultimate sense was connected to Krishna and cows and Brahmanas, etc. But it was not done in a very formal way with some fire sacrifice and this and that. Okay. So it's a wrong idea to think that these people didn't have. If you do research in this field, like people have done, then you will understand that no, they had their very good system. So this person was telling us, he was almost a 1 hour lecture. He was saying that how he's working with his own community to ensure that they don't take to bad habits like drinking. He was saying that in our community, we never drink only actually. And this is a tribal community person saying, not that, and he was not even, right? So why I'm saying this is, that, so they also had their own ways of following. What we call as samskaras are universal. It was never that they did not have access to it, but they were not under a formal setup of, Veda education and this and that, correct? Because of their lifestyle or, the way they lived, which I would say, dare I say, but I nevertheless make the point that it was much more superior than the lifestyle of so many people today in city, who literally have no samskara only in their life, zero samskara. And it is only samskara that makes you connected to Sanatana Dharma. So even these people were under Sanatana Dharma. Let's be very clear about it. Okay, it was not that they were, Makes sense?
Correct. So then can we say at a very broadly, without not everyone understanding that they are actually doing it, that Sanatana Dharma, if you say that, if you claim that you're connected to Sanatana Dharma, at least you're not denying the existence and the authority of Vedas. Does it mean?
Yes, it does mean that. Absolutely. Vedana mani buddha hoilo nastika. Mahaprabhu says that if you don't accept the Veda, then you become a nastika only. So these people,
because the example that you gave of the sorry.
Go ahead.
The example which you gave of the tribals, they are actually in line with the conclusion of the Vedas. Worshipping Krishna is in line with the Vedas. So they are part of Sanatana Dharma, but not in part of that Varnasrama, which is slightly more sophisticated in terms of attuned towards goal of life. Sorry?
Yes. Yeah, not that formal.
Not that formal, but in a very informal way. In a very informal way, Sanatana Dharma accommodates everyone. So one follow-up question, when I asked that, the first question was what is the bare minimum qualification bedrock, meaning that you are within or without Sanatana Dharma? You said sanskar, but sanskar you will follow based on something. So what is that which makes someone follow sanskar, or within a generation not following it or giving it up? Why do? Because then that would be even more fundamental.
Yeah, no, till 100 years back, it was according to the jati in which people are born. See, according to everyone's jati or community, there was a certain set of samskaras which everybody followed, right? So that was according to family. Chaitanya Leela, it was like that till 100 years back, it was like that, and nobody violated that. See, the point is today, no one follows that. Like, see, that's one sad part. Like, if you see it today, that has happened in the last 100 years, unfortunately. It's a fact. In the last 100 years only, this has accelerated so much.
I'm asking this is there is one historical context to it. Something has happened, but it's not always what is history. We learn from the history, and it is actually happening in our generation also. When we move ahead, we are trying to come back to Sanatana Dharma because of being connected to it through Prabhupada, through ISKCON. But then we may lose it in the next generation or the generation after that. So it's not always harboring on the history. But if we learn from it, pick up 2 or 3 reasons and be careful so that it doesn't happen over here.
Yeah, so 1 or 2 reasons which come to my mind is too much of intermixing. See, if you see till 100 years back, people wouldn't intermix so much in community. Intermix as in, see, nowadays the diversity which people are exposed to in terms of mixing is too much. Like, whether it is eating together or getting married. People get married to anybody or eat with anyone, eat anywhere. This is the whole hotel culture also. I'm just giving that as an example. This is very recent, right? It's very recent. 100 years back, nobody would eat. I mean, no one would eat. It's not that devotees would not. No, ordinary people also would not, because that would break your whole system. That would shake your setup. Okay. So the way we work, that has also changed a lot. The way we work, the way we get entertained. In many ways also rural setup was more favorable to it vis-a-vis urban slightly, because here the mixing, the following of rules has slackened a lot. Okay, but so these are many reasons. The reasons may be many, but the most important thing is to ensure that even with our children, we need to ensure that they follow some dharma, something they should be doing. Okay, some ritual is very important for everyone to follow. Nobody should grow up without doing anything. Like, if you see, average Hindu many times, unfortunately, he doesn't do anything actually. Like, he's not doing any kind of puja part, right? So very few people are still doing that in India, which is the sad part, where every person needs to do it, and which was there certainly even 100 years back. That was the heart of Varnasrama, where they would follow these rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Roji, one last question and then other questions you can take.
Yeah.
What is that which gives a lot of strength in spite of whatever is happening in the society, the way it is progressing, to be able to stick to following the sanskaras, other than doing it as kids when our parents tell us, and when we develop that free will and we come to an age where we can express and follow our free will, what is that which will give us conviction to follow it? Because by a default setting, no one would follow it if you don't do anything.
Yeah. So basically, the default thing which makes us follow is, we could say many ways, but if you go back to the verse quoted by Ramananda Rai, Varnasrama Acharya Purushena Parapuman Vishnor Aryadite Panta, this thing that this is ultimately pleasing to not only Vishnu, but to, whichever God, whichever faith one has in Sanatana Dharma. One may be, as I told you, one may be Shaivite, one may be a Shakta, whatever it may be. But unless you followed the rules of Varnashram, you were not connected only to that Devata or to that deity. Okay, so ultimately faith is there over here, but I don't know whether I'm answering your question. I'm just wondering, you're asking me what gives you conviction to follow? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because not having that conviction or not having that one single reason why you should follow it, just being in this world, by default, you won't do anything that has been done traditionally as part of Bharatiya Sanskriti of Sanatan Dharma. You just won't do it, because you'll try to bring in the way of, as you said, free mixing, trying to find, logically trying to prove. See, what happens is, all these things, all the principles, they are coming from scripture. So one inherent thing which I feel should be very strongly, there should be the Shraddha in the scripture should not go away. Because for anything that, any practice that we have to say, we say it is written in the scriptures, and we just kind of stop our arguments over there. It is there in the scriptures. And what to go beyond? I mean, abhi iske aage kya bol sakte? Now, if you hit at the bedrock of the Shraddha on scriptures, then you are just lost in trying to convince or arguing with that person. I mean, the argument just ends. So the next generation which is coming up, if they find the descriptions in the scriptures to be too fantastic, and they will see, scriptures are not only about the fantastic descriptions that people were flying and so many other things. That is a way of telling some story, but there are many siddhanta also. But if I have developed a sense of doubt in the scriptures because everything appears so fantastic, I'll keep aside the story, I'll keep aside the siddhanta also, I'll keep aside everything. Then it will become very difficult. I don't just believe in Sanatana Dharma, the scriptures. It's someone says we are coming from monkeys. Some rishi said we are coming from Vishnu. It is so fantastic to even believe. Then what to do?
I agree. Scriptural education is important. But going back to the point you made, I feel that the main motivation to follow samskara is because dharma rakshitu rakshataha. That is only the following of the samskaras.
I feel this is a slightly advanced or more mature level to understand. A person is not at that level. Dharma rakshita means he has accepted dharma is important, and it's important to follow a life of dharma. That is also not missing.
I understood that. There has to be that background. See, what has happened is that all that background has been broken in people's hearts. So that's why it is becoming difficult. But that was the actual motivation why people did whatever they did. Because you are protected only with your samskara. Your samskara basically protects you. And that's a fact also. We see that how, because when you have that protection, then only you go anywhere and you don't fall down, or you're not tempted, you're not...
Again, the problem over here is, again, the problem with this will be the next generation or people who do not wish to, they won't consider fall down as a fall down. So what is there
Yeah,
to
I
be
understood.
protected
I
from?
understood. Yeah, I got it. I got it. When you have no background whatsoever and you have completely fallen off the path, then there is a necessity of an education to bring the person on track. That part I accept. I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Education
bro.
is important. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
So I just want to comment on his question. So what is my observation is that that association of devotees and association of Varnashram system keeps the new generation also in following, the samskaras, whatever rituals, even mechanically or let's say enthusiastically in certain ways. So I think association.
Yeah. You need sadhu sangha. There is no question about it. Sadhu sangha is needed for everybody. Yeah, that's no question. And not more than sadhu sangha, asat sangha is a bigger problem. Like the association of the leftist and that liberals, that's more dangerous. One thing I find at least today is even in social media, if you see now, at least when we were children, we had only one view of the world that was there, and that was prominently the idea of the left liberal people. But today, because of social media, I would say rather thanks to social media, there are people with alternate views who are getting space to express themselves. So at least they are being heard. And there are many decent people also in India who, are getting influenced by these type of people and understanding that what we must do or what is the right thing, etc. Even if you see the Kashmir Files movie, at the end there is a scene where this boy, he goes and makes a speech in his university about Sanatana Dharma in Kashmir. It's just a 3-minute talk that he does, but it's amazing. He's giving like left, right, center, from Kashyapa Muni to Shankaracharya to everything. Okay, what is Sanatana Dharma? So I feel one thing good, because of a lot of social media, everybody is expressing their views. So at least previously in our childhood, we heard primarily only the left liberal guys saying something. But today, at least some other people are also saying something, which I feel is very good. Okay, Vaibhav Anand Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, one thing is, Markandeya Kadju recently, I think he wrote an article long back, and somebody, from the right wing, they picked up that article. So he was mentioning that, the Shudras or the lower classes were quite wealthy. And although they were wealthy, they become really poor once there was an industry by the British. And they took, they wanted that all the textile should go to Manchester and everything should be, from Manchester, and these artisans should not grow in their life. And because of the poorness of the lower classes, people, started disrespecting. And that is the reason that we find that so much caste discrimination, people say has come in, because these people have become really poor and nobody, respects a poor man. So, is that so, Prabhuji? I mean, do you agree with this, or how it is?
At least it supports our version, because actually, this whole idea of discrimination and things like that, I feel based on my experience also, is slightly is exaggerated also on many accounts. Actually, if you see the Brahmin community, which is supposed to be the highest in the Varnasrama order, to say that they tortured or they looked down upon everyone is not so true. It doesn't have so much basis. And I can certainly believe this because, just taking another reference, there is this book written by, I forgot this proper disciple's name, he has written economics. He's written this book on economics in 3 modes. He has quoted in great detail how the British, they destroyed the art. Huh?
Dr. Sadev Prabhu.
No, not Sadev Prabhu. This is another person. Economy in 3 modes. Forgot that book. We have discussed that many times from that book. I'll share that later on Q&A group. I have a soft copy of that book also. Very well researched book. Very well researched book. He has written this book on economy in 3 modes, and he has given great details about how the artisan community in India, which is basically what we are saying. Shudra means artisan community, right? How their talent was destroyed by the British. He has given like evidences. He is a Westerner who has done this research, a proper disciple. He has written this book. A lot of evidences he has given how this artisan community were butchered by the British because they got affected directly by Manchester and other things also that he quotes. And it is a fact that when you don't have money, nobody respects you. That is also correct only. See, poverty, they say that Daridra Guna Dosha Nashi. Daridrata destroys all good qualities. Daridrata is condemned actually. If you're poor, it makes you also have a lot of low esteem about yourself, and you lose respect in the eyes of others as well. So to be well off is very important. And I can very much, at least based on the other book that I read, I can resonate with whatever you are quoting here. That certainly this whole discrimination business, these British people, they did it in so many ways just to divide and rule over us. And which unfortunately is currently also going on in India in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And Proji, like, for example, this untouchability thing, you have said that only in marriages and food, people will restrict themselves within the jati system. So, how does that work? I mean, whether it's a bad practice which has come or whether it was really there. I mean, should one practice? Was it being practiced by even Lord Chaitanya? How it is?
Yeah, see, this is not untouchability. See, untouchability, first of all, if you see in the Vedic system, touching was never done so much. I mean, people wouldn't touch each other so much. This whole thing of pranam only. The shake hand is a modern system where you touch another person. So that's one thing. I mean, literally going into that touching, not touching. But not eating out of one's jati was common till 100 years back in India. I mean, that was a very integral part of Varnasrama where you wouldn't eat from someone whose standards you did not know. It's simple as that. See, you don't know that fellow's standards, right? How can you eat food cooked by him? Okay, so this was the understanding.
Can a lower jati one eat from a higher jati?
That is fine. That is always fine. That is always fine because his standards are not getting compromised in that. See, but for a Brahmana to maintain his standards, Ahara Sattva, that quote is there now, Prabhupada. Ahara Sattva, Shuddha Sattva, Dhruva Smriti, Smriti Lamhe, I forgot the middle line, Vipra Moksha. Yeah. So basically, everything starts from Ahara. On food, people were really brutal in terms of their strictness in Varnasrama. Nobody would eat outside just like that. Hotel and all is like you don't even know who is cooking what, who is that fellow. Nowadays, so most of them are Muslim guys only sitting and cooking. I mean, what to speak of standards and all that. And so many things come on social media also. Somebody spits in the roti and this and that. So basically, unknown places eating was always a no-no. And this rule was followed by everybody till all our grandparents' generation, it was followed, let me tell you. It is just that in the last 50, 60 years only, it has become very cool to eat anywhere and everywhere. But otherwise, people would never. And this was not considered. See, at the point is nobody would take it very offensive. See, that's what I was reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita also. Mahaprabhu is going to the house of so many devotees and he's going along with this Brahmin cook. And that Brahmin cook is cooking in their house. And they are also fine with it. Nobody is saying that, Arey, how come you have come to my house and you will not eat what I cook and your cook will cook in my kitchen? You know how all that. Nobody is making a fuss out of it, right? I mean, it was accepted. It was fine. That is how it was. That Sanodaya Brahman is also surprised. He's telling Balabhadra Bhattacharya, you please cook. Because he's conscious that he's a lower Brahmin, so to speak. Because he's the guide of certain Vaishyas who are engaged in liquor business. Yeah. So he's saying that how can I cook for Lord Chaitanya? But Mahaprabhu is saying, no, you cook for Madhavendra Puri and Madhavendra Puri accepted. Yajyadacharati Shrestha, so I can accept. So this was the only compromise that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made. I mean, even if you want to call it a compromise.
So Prabhuji, how do you see it within the devotee community? And see, politicians today, the leaders are going and eating, because of voting kind of at the back of their mind. When the leaders do it, they do like Amit Shah goes
No, I don't understand that. Yeah, they will do that. I mean, see, they have to do, see, now that is the pitfall of the modern democracy, right? You have to do all this to show your love for everyone, which is actually not so necessary, I feel. But they may have to do it because they have to get vote of everyone. But so if you're in that position, then that is fine. But as far as a Vaishnava is concerned, at least eating from Vaishnavas or whatever, that's a good standard, right? I mean, as in, that's what is expected. Huh? That means you eat only food cooked by devotees, right?
Okay.
Because, yeah, that's also important.
Okay.
Yeah, Srivas Chandra Prabhu said, Dhaneshwar Prabhu. Yeah, Dhaneshwar Prabhu is the author, Spiritual Economics.
Yeah. Prabhuji, just this, a little, two things. What about Ghungat? Do you feel that was really there in the Vedic system and, people have given it up completely? Now they're not even, ready to put even a simple covering over the body. Ladies have completely given it up. So
I need to do some study on it a little bit because, in North and South, this is different. I've observed, for example, in South India, the system of Ghungat doesn't exist at all. In North India, it exists quite a bit. I suspect it is because of the Mughals and, that particular era. Maybe we need to do a little more study to understand where it originated and how much it is an integral practice like it. Because in South India, this is not there at all. In any community, Brahmin community, any community, no Ghungat, anybody. You go to the Madhvasri, Sampradaya, Iyer, Nambudiri, no one wears any Ghungat. And they don't consider that as a symptom of being chaste, etc.
Yeah.
Right? Covering the head like that. So, but
there are descriptions like Radharani used to go with a long ghungat. There are so many descriptions like that. The longer the ghungat of Radharani was, she would not be getting identified by Krishna and Krishna would get perplexed. All these stories are there in Braj.
Yeah, I know, but many of these stories I feel are also written in the social context of 15th century India.
Okay.
I don't think that these are stories. No, I'm not talking. See, the question of true false doesn't come so much because it's not the objective reality that is important. It is about the feeling, right? I mean, it's like, see, a simple thing, for example, when they cook food, see, Gujarati thali, which is offered to Krishna, is different from a South Indian thali that is offered to Krishna, right? So the thing is that there are regional and cultural superimpositions also on that. So I would need, because if you see the Bhagavatam, you may not find those stories. The stories that you are quoting, these are primarily in the context of 15th, 16th century India, right? In that cultural context, stories and drawings are made. My point is, you cannot separate the two. It's not about right or wrong. It's nothing. I mean, Radharani may wear and not wear also. So that's all fine. But the point is...
Just the last thing, Prabhuji, that, for example, we have our friends and, they have their wives. So, you have just quoted Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not even talking to anybody, any other women, or not, joking around. But nowadays, the culture is not like that. Even if we do not talk to somebody, they may get offended. So how do you...
No, that is correct. But at least we should ensure that, we maintain the rule of three. The rule of three is that if you're talking to your friend's wife, it should be at least when your friend is there. It shouldn't be when he's not there. So that means there's a rule of three, no? The rule of
like
three,
WhatsApp,
right?
you do,
three people.
Send messages. We also
so
have sent messages.
There one has to be very guarded. In private chats with women on WhatsApp or email and all, one has to be very guarded and reserved. It can invite dangers in many ways, by the way. And so see, when you don't follow a particular rule of Varnasrama, then there are problems also that come. Protection is gone. We were just saying that. The whole thing is to protect a person. Yeah, Haribol.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rishabh Prabhu. Your hand was up. I don't know. Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we hear in history that according to at least what history books tell us, that Lord Chaitanya came to break all the social orders. He was like the untouchable caste. He was there to make their standards go up. He made reformers. He is projected as a social reformer.
No, one second. Social reformer doesn't mean that you have to break anything. social reformer, I mean, I don't know which history book you're talking about, but I would say yes, social reformer Mahaprabhu was, in the sense that he gave the highest ecstasy, the highest pure love of God is accessible to everybody. Okay, no matter who you are, you may be a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, untouchable, whatever you are, you can access the highest love of God. In that, there is no bar. Correct? And that is also, by the way, an eternal Vedic teaching only. Are you getting the point? Even before Mahaprabhu, like for example, there are the Alvars, right? Many of them are coming from backgrounds that are not Brahmin. That's fine. That was always accepted. In our scriptures, there are innumerable stories of people from all kinds of backgrounds becoming pure devotee and going to Krishna. In that sense, you can call him a social reformer, but otherwise, this whole idea that he has come to break the system is totally incorrect. He didn't break any system. He didn't break the system of Varnasrama India. He did not do that. And when he said that this is external, that's why I started my talk with that. It didn't mean that it has to be broken. It just meant that just following these rules and regulations in itself don't give you love of God, which is accepted. That's the only point. Yeah.
That's what he's projected in all the history books. I mean,
history book projects anything. No, forget that. History book says that. I mean, we have learned in our history books that Aurangzeb was a very simple man who would earn money by making topis and selling and this and that. All humbugs, right? So, I mean, he may have made topi as a recreation, but that doesn't make him a gentleman or whatever. So, history books are. I mean, hardly any history. I mean, you read history book after 20 years about Pandits, they will say something that Pandits all left and went away out of their own free will. But that is not the reality, right?
I mean, he's seen hugging lower caste people and talking and making friendship with everyone. Might be in that sense.
Yeah, that is because on the spiritual dimension, there is no difference. On the spiritual dimension, you make... First of all, his hugging and all that is very less only. It's not that he embraced each and every person. He embraced devotees. That part is accepted. And he embraced all his devotees, whether it was Ramananda Rai, was from a Shudra background, or, I mean, anybody, irrespective of their jati, he embraced them. That part is correct, because in that he just saw the spiritual exchange. Correct? Yeah, in that sense, okay, but otherwise he didn't break any major system of Varnasrama. No, there's no evidence on the contrary. On the contrary, he followed everything. That's what I was telling you.
Okay.
Yeah, Haribol. Yes, Nitin.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol.
Prabhuji, I am asking about the eating the food outside of the jati was applicable for the other jatis also, like Vaisyas, Kshatriyas and Sudras. They also don't eat in each other's jatis, or it is only for the Brahmanas at the Vedic times?
No, so they would see from the higher ones you can. So that is there. Even marriage, they say na anulom pratilom. Anulom means the girl getting married to a higher jati was always fine, but for the getting married in the lower was not. So like that. Brahmin would obviously cook and give everybody, right? Like if you go to a temple, like Mahadevendra Puri is arranging some Brahmanas to cook for Gopal, and that food is distributed to everybody. Correct? So Brahmin cooked food was taken by all. So it basically applied equal and above. See, the whole idea was that your standard should not be compromised. Let's try to understand the purpose of it. Correct now? So that is why that rule was there. We need to understand the reason for the rule. Then we can appreciate the rule. If we don't understand the reason, then we cannot appreciate. Yeah, Haribol.
And probably point is that as you are about the Varnasrama dharma and all, but as in our setup of the ISKCON present here, these things are not followed and not possible up to an extent. They are not be encouraged in the good sense. So we cannot follow, in general, as a spiritual organization, also cannot be followed. Okay, for example, like a sannyasi going and eating at one devotee's home and not other devotee's homes.
No. So at least they're eating only from a devotee's home, right? So at least there is some system followed, na? See, in that also, devotee also, there is at least one jati which is being observed, na? People are following same set of standards. So at least that much is there. It's not that they're eating anywhere and everywhere. The point is,
Okay.
there is some system which is there, which is according to modern times correct. So that's fine. I'm not necessarily saying that one has to go back to that. That was never my point. My point was to understand that how Mahaprabhu was following it. I just wanted to make that point. Yeah, Haribol. Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Haribol.
Prabhuji, this was in continuation to Amar Gaur Prabhu's question that regarding the sanskaras. So one devotee was asking that if he does the Upavit sanskar for his son, and later on if he doesn't do the sandhya, then will it be a suggested thing to be done? Because as a matter of father's duty, he was feeling that I should do, but then...
Yeah, but the question is he doing it? You ask him the question, is he doing it? If
He's doing
he does,
it.
yeah,
He's
if he
doing
does,
it.
his son will do. If he's not doing, his son
Yeah,
will not
but
do.
he
Let's be
feels
very
that
clear
his
about
son
it.
may not. He feels that his son may not do eventually.
No. Why do you start with that assumption? I mean, this is a very terrible assumption to begin with. It's like
No. He said that. He said that the way the son is, he feels that he may not do.
See, that's what. Now, see, everything has a time and things to be done. See, generally these things are to be done when the boy is 7-8 year old. At that age, they hardly have any
12-year-old son.
So then the time has also gone a little bit. Okay, then you'll have to discuss with the boy and understand. But generally, these things are done when the boy is like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is getting this when he's 7-year-old. 7 is the standard time when it is done. So when you do it the right time and if the father is doing, then the son will do. There's no question he will not do. Every child follows the father. Muslims are doing 5 times namaz a day. Why your son will not do if you are doing it and you do it at the right time? You have that culture. If you start only with the assumption that nothing will happen, then it's very difficult. And so these things, samskara is not, timing is also very important. Timing is very important. When you do it.
That means he should have that faith and with a positive frame of mind, he should do it.
Yeah, and henceforward, anybody is doing, they should do for a 7-year-old, 8-year-old boy. See, when somebody is 15, 20-year-old at that time, you can't do all these samskaras and tell that, chalo, abhi tumko karna padega. Aisa kaise hoga? Nahi karega, kuch bhi nahi karega. He's a grown-up guy, na? Samskara is done when you're a child, not when you're a grown-up man.
Yeah. Also, he wanted to know, is it like kind of little disrespectful that if his son doesn't follow, or a kind of like, is it going to be a sinful thing? If he doesn't follow, he vows, then he doesn't follow.
See, I mean, it's the same thing like anything else, right? Like you initiate people with 16 rounds. So many people don't chant later. So are you going to stop the process of initiation?
No.
Try to understand. So many people to whom our gurus and all give initiation, they're unable to chant later japa. Doesn't mean we stop the process thinking that अरे वो follow नहीं करेगा बाद में. नहीं बाबा, जितना किया उतना तो कुछ हुआ ना. So see, when you start something, you don't. It's like you don't start like, for example, studies thinking that what if I fail in the exam. When you start study, you have to think that I'm going to pass only the exam. If you start only thinking that I fail in the exam, then you cannot start only, right? You can't start anything. So I think, yeah, there are so many things that can be said, but I think the point is made, right?
Yes, bro. Thank you.
Haribol. Yeah. Any other question anybody has? Srivat Chandraprabhu, your hand is up.
Bro, just one
ahead.
point I wanted to make. It was very interesting. Actually, the point what you made, right? That external, Varnasrama is external and all those things. So recently, some months back, or Hari Parshad Prabhu gave one class on this forest of material enjoyment, Bhagavatam, what we have, right? We made a very nice point. He said that in our scriptures, because there it is condemning a lot about householder life and all, correct? So he was telling a very nice point. He said in our scripture, he told some term. He said, there is always a comparison that is to show the greatness of the other process. For example, detachment is what is talked about. In that context, the householder is so much. So that doesn't mean that householder is bad or something. So he was making this point very interestingly. So similarly, always we hear something say Bhakti Yoga is higher, Karma Yoga is lower, many things like that, external or higher, lower. That doesn't mean that lower, as you said, lower. It's not that lower has to be cancelled or not followed. In fact, if we have to follow that nicely, then you transcend that. That is the meaning. You made a very nice point. That just one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very nice point. Haribol. Yeah. Anybody else? Whose hand is up?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yeah, Haribol.
Prabhuji, many times we also hear that bhakti process is so powerful that it doesn't need the support of Varnashram. And because Varnashram system is complicated and there are so many things need to be followed and taken care of, the tendency becomes that, okay, yeah, anyway, bhakti is so powerful, then why to worry so much and why to get into debate of all this ashram is really required or not required? So how do we explain to our own self and to others with this view?
Is there any scriptural support for this statement, or it is just made randomly? I mean, is there any scriptural statement? See, scriptural statement would be that bhakti is very powerful. Nobody is doubting the power of bhakti. Also, nobody is doubting the fact that even a person with very bad samskara can become a great devotee, like some Valmiki becomes, or the Haridas Thakur transforms a prostitute. All those examples are there. Okay, but at the same time, empirically as well as shastrically, it is observed that the samskara gives you that background, which keeps you protected. Otherwise, without that patra, see, Varnashram and samskaras are like patra, it makes a favorable vessel. In that vessel, you can drink kheer. If you don't have a patra only, I can say that I can drink kheer by licking from the ground also. But that's not a very suitable way. Maybe you'll not be able to drink kheer effectively without a proper vessel. Okay, so Varnashram is the vessel and bhakti is the content. It is the most important content that you'll put in the vessel. But the idea that the vessel is only not important is slightly hippie culture. As in, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that any bit. And also empirically, it is seen, for example, if you see for example, in the Western world, because of a lack of samskaras or proper systems, you see that devotees do have difficulty in following even devotional service throughout life. Whereas in places like India, because of proper family and at least some resemblance of Varnashram, even though it's a dead Varnashram, but even in that death, there is something left. Okay, so you see stability in people, and I mean, all of us here sitting here, we are all practicing for 20 plus years. In the Western world, it's very difficult to get anybody like that. And it is not because they are not convinced, it's because these systems are not.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Last question, Mataji.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Dhanavad, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, the question was actually in the evening, we were discussing with our son Jagannath. So he was telling that Charavaka was also accepted in Varnashram. Means even the atheist philosophy is accepted, and he also has some doubts about some very imaginary. He feels imaginary stories of onion garlic, that the story of that the cow was buried and the onion garlic was formed like that. And also he feels there is some logical explanation, and for common people and for less intelligent people, such stories were created. So, but then there is a high risk that he may think that all this, I don't know whether it is a Puranic story, but he will feel that all the Puranic stories are only like that.
See, that is why, for people in that age, in that 14, 15 onwards, they need things like nyaya and logic more than all these stories. See, these stories are, he could be right very much that, see, many of the stories are allegorical also. They are not so literal. So we don't know which is literally accepted, which is allegorical and so on. But many times the stories are there because simple people can understand through that medium. Okay, but for more complex people, there is nyaya, there is Vedanta, right? There are scholarly ways in which things are understood. And that has to be emphasized. So that's why you should know the nature of a person and give him shastra according to that. If a person has a scholarly bent of mind and you tell him fantastic stories from the Puranas, तो उसको appeal नहीं करेगा, वो बोलेगा कि क्या बोल रहा है मेरे को. He may need a different presentation. So the Vedas have such a huge.
So there is a possibility that these stories are imaginary. The Puranic
very well. Many Puranic stories are allegorical. See, we may not know without any Acharya commentary which is allegorical, which is not. But the point is to stick and defend that every story told is true to the letter. That is also not correct. Like, I mean, simple thing, you read Chaitanya Bhagavat. Like Chaitanya Bhagavat is also like a Puran, right? You read that Yamaraj and Chitragupta did not have a track only of how much things Jagai and Madai have done and so on. Please try to understand, there is Atisha Yokti. Atisha Yokti matlab exaggeration hota hai na likhne mein. Like we
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
there were so many devotees yesterday in Gaur Purnima, temple all was flooded, people were ecstasy, right? People were dancing and chanting like madman. Everybody perhaps was not chanting and dancing like that. But so see, Puranas are not, the purpose of Puranas is not to be exact to the word, mind you. This point you have to tell him. Purpose of Puranas is to transform your heart. So the stories have that intention. They are not, if you want to understand things very logically, study Nyaya and Vedanta. Who stops you from that? Udhar aapko milega sab kuch. There you will get this thing, logic properly. So that's why, so yeah, so depending on the person,
stories like reptiles and all were, born out of that female Kashyap's wife. Such things make actually devotee community
also many stories, many descriptions are very simplistic. See, we should not expect. Srimad Bhagavatam is not a biology textbook to tell you exactly how the scriptures, the creatures were created, no? So there can be simplistic versions also of the reality, and that is enough for most people to understand. Why they don't want to get into all those technical details of why, what, and all. Okay, so that is why, that is why Shiksha, Vyakaran, Nyaya, these things were considered more fundamental. And Puranas actually come later or in childhood. At a particular age, particular Shastra is to be given. If you give the wrong Shastra at the time, then the fellow will get confused.
Okay, and what about Charvaka, Prabhuji? Was he a part of Sanatana Dharma? And one more question is whether whether in previous ages was there any class of people who was out of Sanatana Dharma? Because even demons, we see that they had in today's term Hindu names, and they were also worshipping some kind of god and all.
Asura also. Only Rakshasas do not. Rakshasas and Asuras are different. Asuras, also are, even Rakshasa, like Ravan is a Rakshasa, even he is worshipping Lord Shiva. So everybody, see, when we say, as far as Charvak is concerned, when we say atheism in Sanatana Dharma, what it particularly means is that no one is kept out or thrown out. See, it's not like the Abrahamic religious systems where, see, atheism in Sanatana Dharma is slightly different. As in, there can be an atheist who still follows some samskaras. And I also know such people like that. I've met, they say they don't believe in a god, but they will still do some type of worship as a matter of duty or whatever principle. Okay, so in Indian system, atheism is much different than this Western term atheism. Western term atheism is very strictly around the belief system. You believe in that prophet, you are a theist. You don't believe, you are an atheist. Here it is not that simplistic. So atheism has several shades and variety here. So if you go into Nyaya also, some statements in Nyaya are not completely theistic in the sense that, they don't, the Vedanta is the peak of theistic thought. So from the Vedantic perspective, they say that, this particular idea in Nyaya is actually atheistic, they will say. So this whole idea of atheism also is not that simple here. So that's why people could have various conceptions and they are all accommodated and they go along. It's in that sense it is said. It doesn't mean that Sanatana Dharma is propagating atheism or anything. Certainly not. Ultimately, everyone understands that this is where it leads to. That part is accepted. But the point is, so like that.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, we should end. Yeah,
one last comment. I mean, this continuing the same question. One last comment is my understanding was whatever comes in the Puranas is actually not allegorical, and if it is, it becomes obvious in the text itself that it is allegorical. Thinking of the example in Bhagavatam of Puranjan's story, it becomes very obvious. It's mentioned in the text itself. It's allegorical, and most of the allegorical stories which are there come from Lokachara and Lokokti.
No, even if not allegorical, it could be a simplistic description. Like, for example, tell you when the creation, when the universe is being described, Shukadeva Goswami doesn't tell Parikshit that this is the only way to understand. No, he first of all makes a comment that the universe can be understood in so many ways. I'm just giving you one way of telling about it. Are you getting the point? So So if somebody were to stick and say that no, this way that Shukadeva Goswami explained is the only way to look at the universe, Shukadeva Goswami himself has said that the universe can be seen in so many ways. Okay, so many things like that are there, and also there is Atishayokti, which I said. Like for example, like we have discussed this, Chitraketu had 10 million wives. 10 million, literally married 10 million times because he was not getting a child. He married 10 million wives, it is said. Okay, so sometimes many Acharya commentaries are also there that say which is allegorical, which is not. My basic point is the Puranic thought process purpose is not to go into that whether it actually happened exactly like that or not. That is to transform your heart. So those stories are there in line with the Siddhanta. Like if you ask a question, is Brihad Bhagavatamrita story, it's like a Purana only, right? Is that story actually happened? Did that story of Gopakumar actually happen? It is immaterial actually. Whether it happened or no, what difference it makes? That story is in line with the Vedic thought process. What is the Vedic thought process? How you go back to the spiritual world. Whether it happened or not, that point only doesn't come here. Because the Purana purpose only is different. The purpose is to transform your heart through a story. So they never went into this so much. It's coming because we are coming with that baggage of history, where it is very fact-centric. Correct? Now, our modern history is very fact-centric thing. In World War II, how many people died? That's what is happening in Kashmir files also. I was seeing the interview of the Vivek Agnihotri on some media. They are saying that did 4,000 Pandits die? That is immaterial. Why are you going into that number? 2,000 may have died, 5,000 may have died, but they died, na? And those who died, they died like this horrible death only. It was terrible to be killed by your neighbor and all these people. Okay, so many times now that too much overemphasis on fact, which is coming from the modern history narration, is counterproductive. That's not the goal here. So that's why I'm saying that if somebody has a problem, that's why you should read Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book called Krishna Samhita. He basically says that he gives a completely different perspective only. I'm not going to that now. We're getting a bit late. But he starts by saying that you can assume the Puranas to be mythological, and from there he starts explaining about Krishna. Okay, so my purpose is let's not get into that too much, especially if a child has a problem with some story or anybody has a problem with a particular story in the Purana. Let's not get into, hey, come on, this is the true history. You have to believe like this exactly it happened. No, you cannot say that. Maybe it is not like that. How do you know? Or that's not the point to be emphasized. That's
yeah. Thank you, bro. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.